Virginia's mining outside, but mining on land.
Or like right now, Trump is already like taking efforts to increase deep sea mining.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. Trump's mining orders are all failing. China will use its influence to set ISA rules until the playing field, which means we'll be guaranteed to get locked out. The keto and avoid evidence is really good on this. It said that any executive orders or alternatives not only fail because of geopolitical, social, and environmental conflict, but also unleash worst case like global scenarios. We've had other countries race to authorize mining. We have like unsafe mining, we wreck supply chains, and there's existential war and ecological collapse. So the question is not mine, yes, no, it's mine on land, fail and spark conflict, or ratify UNCLOS, safe mining, everything works out, global peace.
Okay, that makes sense. That's crossed. It's 5 minutes.
I think so.
Okay,
I don't.
I think it was 4 last flight, so let's do 4.
Okay.
I'll take a bit of burn pebbles right here. I think fine. Wait, where are these 3 different sausage with that?
So ordering cheese.
I think it's just dropped down.
Sorry,
No. It's okay for burgers. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but you guys have to be facing the camera. You
Oh.
guys can't be turned away from it.
There.
Yeah, these are gonna be published for the account. So
Okay, so like.
if there's just a way that you guys could like turn
yeah,
around.
good. I just go over there.
Extraction level 3. Nobody in this road receive years into stream come to collaborate, productive collaborative people advocates, these are to know and surpass the street admin, research things expand for fun, understanding knowledge and rich, and research slash and exploitation, joint unclass open series after unlimited climate losses that 4 strong drilling on land moving walls and exposed to what? Exposed to laws and market activities and pollution from land based source crops for the ban laws to raise that infrastructure but cycling those actions researchers recent advisory opinion to bring for unclass multiple kind of litigations now from the stream 4. And they put on the tribunal issued advisory on crime unclass subject to obligation control by the environment, clarifies the publication, right? All the surveyors that they are risk unclass proceeding to be action by projects companies, location companies satisfied, simplified, compliant with Paris Agreement agreement, all the locations companies, the current climate litigation is stopped by Trump, which 124. Trump will know environmental litigation signed us to the Department of environmental issues, did not file any new laws for all any settlements and decisions are final, not subject to appeal, but it's 12. We're spending the lawsuit judgment will be found one course 139 states decision see measure as the Supreme Court judgment not subject to appeal. Trump because with separate lawsuits in the past link is unique, decided novel, and it is protected by litigation. Trump's measures financial markets because this is valid. It is examined by litigation needs to be valid by carbon wage affecting this negative decision or claim one but I didn't come up with so negatively claimed to litigation tax of the reputation on time made legal cost time litigation develop increase frequency. It now becomes more pronounced legal cases cases are still shut procedural violence to public interest and rise rapidly novel legal approaches that arrive merge elements private investors and not factor stock prices open-ended royalty commitments make drilling profitable in 21. U.S. required to transfer royalties from oil to content option for redistribution value goes for drilling's open-ended commitment to forward gold and content loyalty in American independent stock global energy wars exchange of February 19. There's been no raise for America's resource by market share, America's vital concept, oil grants, secure China, India, conservative vital competition, accidental threat, dominance, sensible use, deals, universal China, Russian, modernized, obstruction, power use, leverage, influence, attention, and checkpoints from news, and first for understand the free bloodshed, weapons, Korea, SAS, energy, almost great with the French and preference. Those American, the flag means global demand, also American, or world order, otherwise extinction goes on before. These nuclear wars on one of the Russian, Iran trying to challenge the American order to political scope over US, each trying to take availability of affordable energy capacity, stable supply, responsible energy plans, national security, and realistic way to reduce emissions, decrease carbon, hydrocarbons, globalizing simple transition, fuel, rich fuel, natural gas, LNG, critical demand, promoting stability, America budget, and calculating geopolitical risk, which is Russian policy, should world war run apart, hydrocarbons forecast and fuel predominant mix worldwide, too early to restrain hydrocarbons, that fully on green alternatives. Next off. The United States federal judicial article that constitutional guarantees the United States to become party to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Souls, Fail, Compelling Action, Number 18. Since the court's executive officials comply with the program, it claims that skill authority when the court can comply with question for wide reason, there's a compliance factors from court of weakness more honest from democratic compliance and his historical record, his special review treaty law is the extradition of jurisdiction of ruling rate 50 UG land from 2. Each of the courts is one of first one relations that committed by states and legislative governments, governments, and political is also judicial and concluded involved with question for party going to the extreme with John Waterford, but it's the case raising the disease also in so cash flow. For rule that is political history to believe that the constitutional laws about that the chief factors for American concern that security application PPC and receiving lectures and to seeking to hold silver chest by the main was received since 2016. The whales have survived the United States findings on communicate protected against predators and so these whales just went to the guy voice relentless effort to protect for those whose 8% of money compatibility fails tempers for operation pollution noise undermining stability of the side will survive into the water court settlement to protect whales from solar noise webs as all these all senators requires an approved senator from court. Those are requirements that are approved treated by children senators in the result of court senator 217. This is not self-implementing implementation for college limited performance while another is very direct sex law. The United States should establish a minute mining mineral mining facility that should create Montana seats opportunities in the Russian China to made a real discussion to update these events from out top. I don't know use first policy with the People's Republic of China play once was argued in 2023. Highest rate of outstanding US essential supply chain trade for the highest deposit multi-billion-dollar value total commerce facility needs essential to rely on import compensation make available from production delivery in rapid time like to use also Arctic conflict on 21. This increased role for NATO Arctic commercial Russian distrust reinforced perception about the NATO expanding needs through RTG's defense market restore offers style methods of escalation increase transferring to go trust Russia through resume meetings like the results of the kind of overview of Gulf 2 and 3. It was seen with US and EU collaborative craft confidence expansion transparency would actually signify the war tensions that might be interference stability peace. First, Normative key up also reduction between more willing towards views is subject to now American normative control the range of workers force not one have will lead to the care of the environment lines Steve budget tool a kind of government sectors in place such as time order and nonetheless just not reduce conflict in the report too. And it's only for unconflict since the board neither easy or nonetheless reduce numbers of the price to rise with plans for those so just no support for hypothesis that will reduce the price control variables strong presence strong feature more speed on the South China Sea maritime will dispute resolution if it's authoritarianism and also wants to shape Iowa also destroys alliance and isolates from HUD or 2. Trump shares some view of central lack of maintaining local economies provide relations of men in the US will be from global transactions with relations with generations of near the partners and the US is unreliable outright versus China Japan Korea and scale from trade that the US frees up American business from market payment is actually skip that China just listen to international law which was from here. Next year's respect for the treaty, China treaty violations as is let's talk treaties for US and China, but members of the ICRT that can stop China will not respect the China laws that the US ratifies across all the Arctic. No, sure, there's no low capacity for nuclear legislation to 23. Like the Russia using the profits, strong players should not even be concerned with love, and leaders with lazy life is not suicidal, with reference to the words attached to the rhetoric. It goes to the extent to which leader feels desperate for that perfection, so Russia, or strong probably rewards and word who is battlefield and doctrine, nuclear weapons, when achievements and doctrine calls for warheads last active, or unfortunate, or utterly disregard 500 retaliation, lost the operational advantage, or to completely understand that the impact of use is all nuclear weapons, and when it declares about hypothetical war game in March, American troops traveled to Norway and involved battle with Russia, simulated engagement exercise, Russian legion with wards to General in 24. People would be up to the I know, and unless it's in the unless it's factory, dissatisfaction that unless the need to operate in order to try to cause opportunities split by sexual wellness, these have a control Russian active eradicate rules and SARS, internal transport or which sent to Russian approach their own domestic law officials in 24. The season laws is the understood welcome to the news around them, be part of which protection with the article structure of the security laws, or protecting the more and such later on keeps in mind. The industry related all causes DSM and 40 24. The industry is commercial offset until I say rights, code complicated by tangled compliance and questions, potential industry bad uncertainty, environmental responsibility of off environment and uncertainty around finance, different conventional other regulatory environmental plus regulation words would take years to get sufficient information more than we are to find medical immediate intermediate medication way 21. Well, the risk line are exactly where they're being extinct and say, well, some higher normal impacts exaggerate the future rate of future types of seen in high passing based on several weeks faster than observed forecasting for case scenarios like scientists making catastrophic forecast predictions to become so like catastrophe in the next no catastrophe forecast gets flips model and strategies to report to including plan and variability to report possibility variability next 2 decades will make probably complete from both space and direction making innovation or transformations already underway fast and investments will survive.
Ross?
Yeah.
Where did you put the last part?
I read the entirety of the last one.
Okay, so all you skipped on case was the final analytic.
Yeah, I'm pretty, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, the counter plan, where does the impact the subpart say that whales are existential?
Yeah, sure. So it talks about a few things. It first talks about the fact that I guess the whales would lose up to like 80% of the range. It says at the
No, I'm not asking about like, yes, okay, the act kills all whales, let's say that's true. Why does that affect humans? So evidence you de-highlighted the our oceans in the part of if die, we won't survive. It is not saying that if whales die, we won't survive. It's saying if our oceans die. How do you get from a couple whales dying to existential collapse of the oceans?
Yeah, sure. So above that, it says by compromising the ability of whales, it would undermine resiliency. And then it says if like I guess that kind of corresponds to the fact that they are key to our oceans in different ways.
Can you explain to me why whales are key to our oceans?
Yeah, sure. So the evidence talks about how if whales and other marine life that also is disturbed by sonar, if they die,
No, not the claim, the warrant. What happens if whales die? Who loses their food chain?
yeah, sure. Well, obviously whales and other marine mammals are a huge part of the food chain, which means that if they die, then they're going to not be able to feed on other mammals. A lot of people will, a lot of like other animals will
Oh, so we have
have
more fish that aren't eaten, more plankton that aren't eaten by whales. Hey, the status of the off,
their condition.
okay, read every part in the oil, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, the PQD counterplan or the judiciary counterplan, do you feel that the United States reopens the NRDC v. Winters case?
No.
Cool. The the evidence talks about how sonar hurts whales. The Hester evidence talks about sonar tests by the Navy. How does the counterplan, like, if I'm understanding correctly, the net benefit is that case gets overturned. Now the Navy can't do sonar tests, right?
Well, yeah, I guess there are a few arguments. I guess you could talk about that case, but also our argument is that they're going to be like more sonar tests in the future.
Yeah, but how does PQD affect any of those?
Well, yeah, the argument is that right now, like courts don't have the ability to rule against sonar tests because it's extrajudicial. And breaking the PQD would set the precedent that it's able to do that.
But to be clear, the only case you've outlined is NRDC versus Winters.
Yeah.
Cool. The case page, Nemeth 14, this was written in 2014. Why is this at all responsive to the YC?
Yeah, sure. It just talks about like statistically, UNCLOS has not reduced any disputes or militarized disputes.
So when the United States is not part of UNCLOS, we have disputes despite UNCLOS. Just making sure.
Yeah.
Cool. I agree. The FCS stuff. Trump, this is about tariffs. Trump just put a pause on tariffs. And how is this responsible?
Yeah, sure. So the middle paragraph, don't even finish.
Actually, no,
Okay.
I'll put that. Judiciary advantage counterclaim oral dissent. Who's first? The advantage farm plan, then the dissent.
Okay. I'll let you know.
I'm sorry. PQD advantage counterclaim in that round.
Yes.
Jump. Yeah, okay.
Then China and Russia distorting nucleus interpretations to create favorable conditions for the SES encouragingly ratifying let's check and stop existential conflict. 1 and C1 assumes no use ratification. The solves now. SES step 1 and C1 no warrant out forces dispute resolution. 1 and C2 Trump doesn't thumb tariffs or pause and be applicated resolve isolationism. 1 and C3 it's about the square that was above. Now the Arctic scenario only ratifying let's check Russian and Chinese influence in Arctic decision making. That's key to prevent norms erosion and Arctic war. 1 and C1 drop 2025 evidence says conflict is risky now. Putin is emboldened and rash because of Ukraine and Russia will leave 0 warning the target with no impacts that now mining. They dropped that everything else fails. Trump's mining orders are all failing and China will use its influence to set rules that tilt the playing field now. No warming impact. They've dropped the impact of supply chain collapse. The PQD counterclaim. 1 per PDF and other issues counterclaims with actually functionally benefit. Actually skip that. Can't solve certainty. Only complete adherence to the treaty and maximum regulatory certainty can prompt investor certainty. That's Gilbert. Gilbert 25. Will insert Gilbert and credibility. The counterclaim is an example of referring the decision away from the US. That means it can't solve diplomatic credibility. No one knows what it looks like. See, it's time frame across the counterclaim takes too long. SES and Arctic has to lead now. That's Escamino. Counterclaim must be textually functionally benefit. Anything else cause limits explosion voice. Offense research and text clash now. Process counterclaims are voter justified intrinsicness. They're infinitely unpredictable. There's entities that we all are. Offense and force us to double turn ourselves and prove bullshit. Link for the counterclaim. US means obsession. Chicago 13. US is not a single entity in order to produce a just government has bodies and prove. And no link to the decide first non treaties executive can become part of the other that prove by Trump actions with recent treaties can't solve treaties are not part of the process. Duke Lono Secretary of State authorized negotiation representative negotiates signed treaty to the president's administrative the Senate committee reports the Senate decided considers and approves means they definitely can't solve because they do not feel that the plan actually happens now. A process the impact no impact of court cases about whales has ended. They do not feel it's brought back and relitigated. The 2 will be too late. No whales impact has heard about 1 sonar testing case not banning all sonar non-unique impact sonar still exists and turn the obstacle to enforcing environmental regulation. The Arctic self IDA
and subsets collapse of oceans and Texas Central not whales and preservational efforts, and the advantage counter plan permitting the outcome of any combination of plans to comment voting issues to emphasize for different clashes so logically consistent advocacy, exacerbate structural disparities, this but also offense here. And from a very end, only gratification gives the China plank only is the third plank thing. Only gratification gives an added avenue to confront China's purposeful shifting of maritime north by creating pressure for compliance and encouraging allies to change interpretations that the Beagle evidence will insert, and it fails. Card never makes a solvency claim, just says other countries should support us no more. Why? In case terms only the aperture's ally commitments don't look hypocritical. Now, no first use, lack of diplomatic credibility, zeros. This China rush will never listen, and will the SES and Arctic are not use for trade, and no NFU credibility. More 22. Would not solve the crisis ability adversaries unlikely to be reached or part of CNO first use of reduction commitment to drive them to see nuclear forces shifting entirely during the war security crisis would be terrible idea, especially for an administration that was rallying American partners contain adversaries can't solve legal instrumentalism, which is the primary tool of challenge. US ILO Arctic can't solve absent replication. We can't defend or finalize claims that makes competing claims escalate to war that with the Freeman evidence will insert and drop the golden seal evidence that the only thing to pressure Russia and Chinese compliance means they won't work. The REM stuff doesn't solve, drop Cato and avoid evidence. Any executive orders or alternatives not only fail but also unleash worst case globally because other countries race to authorize more and rack supply chains leads to accidental war and ecological collapse. And Gilbert evidence says terrestrial mining fails because of social opposition, geopolitical vulnerabilities, declining ore grades. Now the oil decide only UCLOS can provide legal protection for fossil fuel extraction, building communities, and separate provision is consistent with US 25. Ratified UCLOS provide legal rights to develop oil, gas, and mineral resource provisions. Guarantee the US will be our key decision environmental protection fully consistent with US programs. Resolution on behalf of corporations and lawsuits have been high for years. Our evidence assumes Trump 2 months later, more into the 322 lawsuits city 2017 see financial damages states municipal governments who create court appeals by companies law. Case to move forward under state laws in the favor of Trump can't the Republican there's world companies if oil companies lawsuits made doing business more difficult, and the link is unwinnable. Their evidence of misunderstanding the posted international law more 23. Grows agrees that the US may be supposed to environmental lawsuits and harm its interests. The US control the resource in a massive area, agree to a royalty per factor or on hugely overestimates vulnerability in international environmental lawsuits. Lawsuits can consider pollution will only be legally binding specified standards for international organization. Any such standards will only be binding with the consent of the US. Cut the card at US and turn Article 297 to stop using from imposing environmental regulations. Pursue 15 Article 297 we use those binding the US to adopt environmental regulations, and their evidence agrees to investment now, which makes the impact not unique. The impact is sunk by tariffs.
Okay, 220, I think.
We have the last card you read, sorry, the author name.
Zakaria was the insert, the last
Okay.
author of the card was Bruce.
Wait, sorry, I have 130. Oh, voting issues, condo, process counterclaims, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. None of the cards ordered. I guess the counter plans will decide things.
Wait, which one plans first?
I guess they're like both of this. Is there anything about your saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is everyone good?
Yeah.
Taking note counterplan successful competition, on funded bad funding is good, adding significant processes, multiple opportunity cost force good, writing more efficiently, PNP, or solve with extension process or checks, and that way research is a portable benefit for college workers, strives, views, and everyone, and ifs and these terms are known as it's not the next drop to time balances respect, it's about one technical consensus, there is not an strategy, the one error, it is the two and one, whatever CPs will also need to be dissatisfied fully because there's no right line now on process counterplans, bad process counterplans are good, one is real world education for congressional implementation for controversy and evidence for the trend of massive topic critical thinking skills as well as conservative planning multiple angles at innovation for creative research sheet heads is predictable, they're read on every topic, no travels, read access specific advantages terms and answers to specific actions good text we must internet ask us for slash read internet private food choose topic and theories reason protect your on the team that oil just that. Oil production high now that destroys the huge illusion clause of cutting its energy leadership, causing dependence on the Middle East and China. Supply could be intentionally or unintentionally cut off any time, triggering escalation global hotspots independently. Lack of struggle with the American oil cause energy wars that go to good outweighs one is time for Russia. And China rapidly scaling military drills and openings in bases will immediately pounce on global energy supply. They can see if they can overtake the US as of Aria 2 terms case. They conceded the 1 and 2 evidence act of stable supply of oil, take out all scenarios first, take out kind of Russia and South China Sea because our enemies would know that in maritime north, our enemies would know that the US is no longer able to prolong, sustain a drawn out conflict, which means it destroys naval power and photos and means that we're not able to successfully deter either of them. Second, it would also spread dialogue as other countries would trust the US lost the oil crown. Also, they can see that the world would run on hydrocarbons for decades, and natural gas is a key bridge fuel that allows us the later transition to renewables, which states that the deep sea mining center now going they completely conceded the climate the royalties like cost requires companies to transfer billions in royalties from oil tax into the UN destroys any incentive to extract. This was completely conceded. The only one they responded to was lawsuits, but this link was completely separate. It means that because companies are not going to want to kind of transfer billions of dollars and royalties from the oil extract to the UN, which destroys any incentive and destroys American kind of oil production, even if which was completely conceded, which means the link should be at 100, but even then also extend the litigation link. Due to alcohol pollution regulation, the plan would open the use of the lawsuits for any oil extraction to environmental and sustainable 1 and 2 drugs that destroys oil companies through legal cost, reputational risk, and market trust. Now, 1 and 2 is wrong until they first of all, or I think the 2024 Illu's ruling says that kind of all kind of final tribunal decisions are going to be binding, which means there's no way to kind of opt out of it independently, even if it allows their evidence to would allow for revisions. If that's true, then they obviously can't help their own advantage because it doesn't give them any credibility, but they still need to oil decide because they conceded the royalties was late. Now, the second argument for royalties for years is wrong. One, our evidence from literally a few days ago says that Trump is kind of stopping the new wave of litigation, and second, you should frame this to the magnitude of litigation status quo in the past. There have only been a few lawsuits. Their evidence is to quantify how many, but the plan would skyrocket that because people would be like incentivized to sue companies immediately. Now they say it's often the misunderstanding argument is wrong. It is legally binding. Their evidence is wrong. Does not assume that recent 2024 ALIS ruling that states are required to take all necessary measures to reduce pollution. Otherwise, they're subject to countless lawsuits, which was one single law in Watkins 24. Now the argument in Article 297 is wrong because it conceded Article 39 says decisions are final and enforceable, but even then their evidence is also old. It doesn't assume the recent 2024 ALIS ruling, which takes out all of their arguments because it means all of the arguments on the fact that UNCLOS is non-binding or these criminals are not binding does not take the new ruling into account, which uniquely kind of triggers our impact because that one is the one that we were talking about. Now, even if you don't believe any of that, they completely conceded the royalties link, which means it should be at 100 now. On the South China Sea scenario, I'm going for two main arguments. First of all, they conceded that U.S. kind of control or U.S. dominance over maritime norms is worse because Trump does stuff like put tariffs on countries. He does not care about foreign diplomacy. He's screwed all of our alliances. He's defunded like every sector of the government, which means that even if kind of Russia and China reshaping of maritime norms is not great, U.S. control is definitely going to be worse. There was no clear response to this, which means it's at 100. And also, they kind of I'll go for the Mimi 14 part, which says that kind of historically UNCLOS has had no effect on kind of reducing conflict, which they just say that like that's because US isn't reporting to it yet, but it just proves that UNCLOS kind of dispute resolution and resolving disputes under UNCLOS is not kind of sufficient in the first place. They also don't have a clear kind of impact to the maritime north scenario. Now the South China Sea scenario first, you can see the Strauss expressly strong to go on 4-2 that says the Trump destroys alliances. The only response is that Trump took off the tariffs, but read the evidence is super good. It talks about even if you put on the tariff, if you took off the tariffs after, it shows allies that Trump is super like hypocritical, unstable, and cannot make up his mind. He's also destroyed alliances through other ways, not only tariffs, but also things like stopping aid. Japan and South Korea and other countries countries like the Caribbean said have already kind of created new trade agreements with the US, which means that Trump is not credible enough to create alliances. Takes out both their kind of it takes also it not only takes out the South China Sea scenario, but also takes out the impact overall because it proves that like it's not going to make the maritime norms more credible if no one listens to us in the first place. Now the Arctic scenario going to Russia leaves Cummings and Rowlands and the evidence right behind that are really good. They talk about how they themselves say that Russia is revisionist, which means that our evidence says that Russia cares so much about the Arctic. They have so many cultural and kind of economic ties to it that they don't like being restricted by UNCLOS at all, and they're just going to leave regardless of US ratification because they don't like the fact that they're kind of subject to laws, different types of rulings, and which means that they're going to leave regardless of what the US does. Their only kind of response is that Russia won't leave. This is not a response, it's just a claim without a warrant, which means that anything in the two area will be now on deep sea mining. First, they've conceded that oil is like a prerequisite to transition to renewables, which proves that the oil demand has to come first. But even then, Luke 24 says the industry is inferior. They just say that like Trump is already kind of Trump proves that that's wrong. Trump only had like one company or so, which proves that we don't have an industry.
Also. Based on the disad order will be. These will be the mining scenario, the SCS, and then the Russia scenario, then the disad. Very good.
Frames this debate, Trump's mining orders are failing. China will use its influence to set ISA rules until the playing field and lock us out. They've dropped, but that is coming soon. We need ratification now to get in the way before ISA rules are cemented. We've solved the impact to drop the Cato and avoid evidence. It is game over. Any executive orders or alternatives not only fail but unleash worst case globally because other countries race to authorize and they wreck supply chains. That leads to existential war and ecological collapse. They've conceded that if we do not ratify UNCLOS, Trump will just mine anyway, which will trigger an existential collapse. Now mining is unsustainable in this pro, and if rushed, it depletes supply so quickly that supply chain benefits are defeated, which turns and outweighs the disaggregate collapse of the supply chains is coming now. It's our only chance to shift ISA norms in time. Now, no impact defense means it's tired drafting out that frames the debate. They kept talking about renewables transition, which is not the impact nor the out scenario. It's about guaranteed wars over mining. If ever it's just in a free for all. If Trump is not part of UNCLOS, he'll mine. It's part competition that escalates. The extinction is an inevitable absent the app because Trump will just continue to try to mine no matter what. The impact is at 100. They've only answered they just said oil is a prereq for renewables. That's irrelevant. The SES stuff, there was no impact to US norms being bad. They dropped this scenario is not about social norms. They asked about shaping dispute resolution. They do not get an impact term because they've not impacted this out territorial boundaries. We need to shape territorial boundaries in a way that is favorable to the US and deter China. Now there's no alliances impact. We're not going for this. Trump does not need credibility. He just needs a seat at the table to make the rules and voting control as part of UNCLOS to shape the ISA. Now the Russia scenario not going for it, but there's no two-way or impact of Russia leaving. So we'll concede that Russia leaves. The scenario is just about shaping mining norms so that we're able to mine. There was no defense on case. Case is at 100, and you know it's try or die because there's guaranteed collapse over mining. The coal evidence is game over. They've conceded in the 1AR, and the link turn outweighs both links. The coal evidence says the ratification of UNCLOS provides legal rights to develop oil, gas, and mineral resources. There are new provisions that guarantee the U.S. veto power on key decisions. That means that no matter what, even if there is mining litigation for other countries, the United States will have veto power on any decisions that affect them. That means it definitely secures the U.S. industry and outweighs their link. Only ours is contextual to the U.S. exception and not a general rule. Now, environmental provisions are fully consistent with U.S. programs. That is from 2025, more recent than any of their evidence, which means that none of the environmental provisions in the U.S. happening right now conflict with UNCLOS. So there's obviously no change. No change. Now the royalties link is definitely outweighed because the coal evidence says that UNCLOS provides legal protection, which means they will be far less worried about paying money if they know that they have legal protection. Now the impact of aiding here was really bad. They have conceded the insert of the Zakaria 19 evidence, which means that the impact is guaranteed. They have conceded warrants like creative destruction and a perfect storm of fossil fuel creative destruction and things like guaranteed renewables happening eventually, which means that energy shift will definitely happen. But which means that energy shift will definitely happen no matter what. Divestment is happening now. Their evidence says that the industry is dying, which means we're not voting on an impact to the industry dying again. Now they've also conceded. Now they've not made any time frame weighing arguments. They've not the royalties link, which was the only thing they have here is A outweighed by the link turn, and B was just explained as they have to pay a bunch. They've not given you any explanation as to when the industry dies, when it collapses, when energy dependence reaches a brink. But we have told you that the ISC norms are getting cemented right now, and we need action or we are guaranteed to have extinction. Try to die. Anyway.